Hey there, Latoya Maddox here. I need some feedback real quick. What would you do if someone started threatening you, like sending you messages to frighten you, like through Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, TikTok, on your phone, just sending you messages to frighten you? What would you do? I really want some feedback about that. Okay, so let me tell you, I've read in the Bible the book of Nehemiah, because I've been studying that the past few months, and that's what happened to him. Someone started sending him letters to frighten him. And guess what he did? Let's take a look at it real quick, because I want to make sure that you see this. This moved me. It says in chapter 6, verse 19 in the book of Nehemiah, it says, moreover, they were speaking about his good deeds, and his good deeds meant this guy called Tobiah, in my presence, and they reported my words to him. You see that? People came to him talking about Tobiah, and when he said something, they went and took it back to him. Then Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. What would y'all have done if this man started sending you letters to frighten you? Back in the day, they didn't have what we have. But so think about all your social media, and someone starts sending you letters to frighten you based on what someone else told them. Let's look at what Nehemiah did, because Nehemiah is the governor of the city of Jerusalem, right? So he has clout, he has some pull. He could get the guys together and fix this thing. He could call war. He could say, look, we're going to go and we're going to make sure we silence this guy because he's threatening me as the governor. This whole city is at risk. So I was like, okay. When I read that, I was like, okay, it's on. I know Nehemiah is going to do something to protect himself and the city. So that was the last verse in chapter 6. This is what chapter 7 starts off with. Now, when the wall was rebuilt and I had set up the doors and the gatekeepers and the singers, he set up singers, and the Levites were appointed, then I put Hanani, my brother, and Hananiah, the commander of the fortress, in charge of Jerusalem. For he was a faithful man and feared God more than any. Then I said to them, do not let the gates of Jerusalem be open until the sun is hot. And while they are standing guard, let them shut and bolt the doors. Also appoint guards from the inhabitants of Jerusalem, each at his post and each in front of his own house. Now the city was large and spacious, but the people in it were few and the house were not built. Then my God put in my heart to assemble the nobles. I like when he said, appoint guards from the inhabitants of Jerusalem at his post and each in front of his own house. And then my God put into my heart to assemble the nobles, the officials. So we see that Nehemiah just stayed true to his focus, at his position as governor. He just made sure that he protected the city as a governor in the wall, but he didn't call an outright war. He didn't go speaking to the other leaders. He didn't go to try and get Tobiah's leader and tell him what he was doing. No, he just stayed focused on what God said. Then he said, my God put in my heart to assemble the nobles, the officials, and the people to be enrolled by genealogy. Then I found the book of the genealogy of those who came up first, in which I found the following record. So I don't know what it is the enemy may be trying to frighten you about in your life. But ask yourself, with anything that you're seeing that's bringing fear, because that's what the enemy wanted to do. He wanted to bring fear into Nehemiah's heart, so the fear would cripple him, so he wouldn't see God's face and he wouldn't be effective at what it was God has called him to do. Ask yourself, what is it in your life? What area of your life right now the enemy is sending you messages to make you fearful? What areas? And if we let him, he will continue to send those messages. But we need to do what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah didn't pay it any mind. This is what God is calling him to do. This is what the enemy is sending him messages to keep him afraid. And this is what Nehemiah did. And that's what we have to do. We got to turn our back on those things. So I saw 3 areas what Nehemiah did. He didn't let the enemy get any hold of in his life, but instead he gave those 3 areas to God. Number 1. He said, then my God put in my heart to assemble the nobles. He was focused on what God wanted him to do. He didn't waste his mind just being preoccupied with what it is this enemy is showing him to cripple him in fear. Because here's the thing. Whatever it is God is calling us to do, whatever He showed us, whatever He's challenging us to do, it is so much bigger than we can ever imagine. It is so much bigger than that. It isn't just that. It just not representing this one thing that he put in our heart. His word says that he's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we can ask, think, or imagine. So whatever it is the enemy is trying to make you fearful over, that thing is so much bigger than you can ever think it would ever be. So we need to do what Nehemiah did. He put his focus on God and what God was calling him to do. Because he said, then God put in my heart. That means my focus is on him. And then he said what God was putting in his heart. He focused on what God was telling him to do. He went ahead and he gathered the people. So whatever's going on in your mind, whatever's going on in your heart that's trying to distract you from what God is calling you to do, don't focus on it. The Bible also tells us whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are true, think on these things. Because if we pay attention and we focus on what the enemy is doing, the messages he's sending us, he could send us these messages to frighten us through friends, Facebook, simple text on your phone, the news. It could be TikTok, Instagram. I mean, whatever he can use, whatever avenue he can use to bring you, to make you fearful, he'll do it because fearful is faithless. If we're operating in fear, we can't operate in faith. And that's the whole point of what he does. And then sometimes guard your tongue. Nehemiah said he was talking about Tobiah, and the people went back and told him what he said. But if you ain't talking with people, they can't go back and tell them anything. So just make sure that you do the first thing he did, is that focus on God and what he's calling you to do. And stay wrapped up in that. And to do that, we got to lose ourselves. I mean, it's like no matter how much time you spend with God, he always challenges us to spend more time. Because he knows, this book I'm reading with T.D. Jakes, right? He said, do you know what the prize is for winning a fight? And I was like, ooh, yeah, we get a crown. I was thinking about all these jewels in my crown when I get to heaven. Because I'm enduring this fight. I'm trying to do things God's way. I am fighting in the spiritual. He said, no. The book called Disruptive Thinking, he said, when you win a fight, the only thing that does for you is qualifies you for the next fight. That's all it's doing. So when you stay in focus on God, he is fueling you with faith, because you're going to need more faith for the next part of the journey. And so when we focus on him, the reward is we grow in faith. We grow in our ability to be obedient to what he's calling us to do. We grow instead of being crippled. But see, when we walk in fear, when we focus on what the enemy is sending our way, whatever the messages are, we grow in fear and we shrink in faith. So let's make it our purpose to do what Nehemiah did. Focus on God so we can grow in fear and shrink in faith. Grow in faith and shrink in fear. Grow in faith, shrink in fear. The second thing Nehemiah did when he focused on God, and he got this, the new thing God wanted him to do in this is, because Nehemiah thought he was building a wall. Nehemiah was actually building the city. He was rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. And here's why that's so powerful. Because God had prophesied that way back when. Way back when he told them, people are going to come and invade you, but I will bring you back when you repent. So Nehemiah when he left to build, he thought he's building one, he's building a city. So and that's why I'm saying God will always challenge us to do things, but it's much bigger than we thought. And Nehemiah didn't realize, but he was living out God's covenant to his people by rebuilding the city. So the second thing Nehemiah did, along with keeping his focus on God, he made sure his energy was used to sow into what God was calling him to do. Let me tell you, when you focus on negative things, that will drain you of your energy. It will suck you dry. You will be having all these sleepless nights because you're focusing on what the enemy is telling you. You're living in fear. But when you put your focus on what God is calling you to do, you automatically want to use the energy toward the things that he's placing in your heart. And that energy, he even gives you more energy, more fuel. Because the more you connect with him, the more effortless things feel. The more you connect with him, it's like you're climbing up. The more you connect with him, He gives you more energy for the climb, and then it gets to a point where just now you've already reached the mountain and you start to descend like the snowball effect. You're going down and you just gather momentum. You gather momentum in him. But when you focus on what the enemy is sending you, the messages he's sending you, it sucks you dry and you become ineffective because you have no energy to do what God is calling you to do. So today, make sure you are focusing your energy, investing your energy in the things that God has put in your spirit, the things that he's calling you to do. Because that's where your energy is going to be maximized, and that's where it's going to make a difference. You will spend all night, we will spend all night tossing, turning, thinking about this thing, and guess what? We wake up in the morning, we're not refreshed. We have no energy to do the things that God is calling us to do. And I'm telling you this because sometimes I do it. And then you wake up the next day and you're like, I accomplished absolutely nothing. I wasted energy on something that God has already told me he's going to take care of. This is the thing he's calling me to do. This is his responsibility. And here I am taking it on, wasting my energy, being fruitless instead of fruitful. So Nehemiah used his energy because it took work to assemble people. Can you imagine trying to get all the people together? This is over 4,000 people at the time. Can you imagine trying to get all these people together? You know how much energy that takes? But Nehemiah knew that God would anoint him to do it. But he also knew that this would be fruitful. Because he was writing down the genealogies. This is so powerful because that shows Nehemiah's level of faith. Because he's writing this down because in years to come, he knows that they're going to need it. Which means he's not even paying attention to Tobiah and his threats because he knows those threats aren't going to go anywhere. But he resort to focusing on what God is calling him to do. So I don't know what area it is of your life that the enemy is sending you messages to frighten you. Messages that could be threatening. It could be your family. The enemy may be sending you messages to make you frightened about the outcome, about your family, your children, your husband, your marriage. And if it's your marriage, girl, look, put your energy in what God is calling you to do. Love, to honor, respect your husband. Because remember, marriage is much bigger than just you and him. Marriage is the only way people get to see God's love for his church through the way you and your husband interact with each other. So remember, it's so much bigger than just you and him and how you feel about each other. It's about God using you to allow people to see what his love looks like for his church, for his people. And it's a beautiful thing to see, and that's why the enemy will frighten you and make you feel like this can't work. He'll make you feel like you can't keep a man. You are not a good wife. Pay that no mind. You focus on what God has told you. If he told you, look, I'm going to preserve this marriage for my glory, you live like that. You put your focus on the things that he's asked you to do. You put your energy into your marriage. You don't put your energy into worrying and following up on what you think is going on. Even if you know what's going on, you don't follow up on that. You let that be. Just like Nehemiah. Nehemiah turned his back to what Tobiah was saying, and he turned his front and his focus to God. Even if you know things contrary going on in your marriage. And this is for the woman who God has already told, look, I want you to love this man, respect him, and honor him. This is for her. You turn your back on that stuff. And you sow into what he's told you to do. Because remember, so you people get to see God's love for the church, but also you are building legacy. This isn't just about you and your husband. This is about the legacy that God is building through you. And it's powerful and it's beautiful. He always wants us to go for the bigger thing, the powerful thing. The small thing is what we feel right now, the fright, the fear, the disappointment, the discouragement. Or maybe you are frightened about what the enemy is telling you about you walking in the gifting God is calling you to. You know he's given you the gift of hospitality, but you feel inadequate. You feel like what you have isn't enough. It's enough. Because little is a lot with God in it. So the little that you have, you operate in your gift of hospitality. You may feel inadequate because he's calling you to teach his word. If he has called you to do that, you walk in that. You invest your energy on that. Don't let the messages that the enemy is sending you that you're not good enough, that you don't know enough, that no one's going to hear you. There are people God has ordained you to reach. There are people that he wants you to reach. You trust him and you walk in that in faith, in courage, and in power, understanding that he has called you for his purpose, and trust that if he's called you, he knows why. Do not let the enemy make you feel frightened about walking in the purpose and the gifting God has anointed you in. For his glory, remember, is not about us. It's about the church. Our gifts are supposed to edify the church, meaning it's supposed to build the people in the church up. And when we're not walking in our gifting, he's looking for opportunities to build up his people through us. So don't let fear cripple you in walking in your gifting. Put your focus and your energy on God. Let him energize you and give you what you need to walk in that gifting. Maybe you're frightened and fearful because the enemy is sending you a message about your business. Turn your back on that message. Turn your focus on God. Use the energy that God has given you to invest in the business that he has told you is going to prosper. Now, this is for you all who you know God has told you. He has already spoken to you about your business. This is for you. Focus on him. Turn like Nehemiah did. Nehemiah didn't even mention Tobiah anymore. He went straight into talking about what he did based on what God is calling him to do, and the fact that he was focused on God, and he was using his energy toward building the kingdom, rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. You focus your energy on rebuilding your business, rebranding it, taking it to another level. That's where your energy needs to be. It doesn't need to be focusing on what this one is saying about your business. Yeah, take advice. Please get it. Put yourself in circles where you can get advice. But do not let the fear be the thing that fuels you. Use fear as fuel while you operate in faith, because you are using your energy toward the things God is calling you to do. The third thing I see about Nehemiah, so first is what his focus. The second thing, his effort. The third thing is Nehemiah used his time toward the things of God, because time is more valuable than money. When we talk about intangible things, I've heard Myron Golds say this. Time is infinitely more valuable than money. So you want to use your time toward the things God is telling you to do, not toward the messages the enemy is sending. Nehemiah didn't waste any more time with Tobiah. He used his time. Do you know how long it took to assemble those people, to write down this genealogy? That took time. But Nehemiah knew that God was doing something much bigger than what he was doing. Because here it is, that same genealogy that he took time to write down is in the Bible today, centuries later. What God is calling you to do, the time that you're going to invest in doing that time is going to transcend any time you could ever comprehend. That time is going to be seen in your children, grandchildren, great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren in time to come. So invest your time in the things that God is calling you to do. Do not give any time. And I'm saying this from experience. You know, sometimes things come my way that distract me. And if I let them, they'll cause me to operate in fear. And I'll spend a whole night tossing and turning, thinking about that thing, worrying about that thing. And then I wake up the next day and I've wasted so much time on this thing that God has already told me what it's going to look like. And now I'm up this morning, I'm not well rested, I'm not fresh enough to be effective as I'd like to during the day, because I've wasted my time looking at what the enemy is sending my way to frighten me. Let's use our time to invest it in the things God is calling us to do, so that we can see the outcome he wants for us. So today, let's do it, Nehemiah. So I'm going to ask you again. If someone's sending you messages to frighten you, what are you going to do? Are you going to do what you thought at the beginning that may not be what God wanted us to do? Or are you going to do what Nehemiah did? That is, invest your focus, your time, and your energy on God and the things that he's calling us to do. I thank God for Nehemiah and how God is challenging us in this study this month. I'm grateful. There's so much to learn in this book about everything, including entrepreneurship. Because I think as entrepreneurs, by default, we're leaders. We're leaders in the community, we're leaders in our ministries, we're leaders in our families, We are leaders because we're taking risks. And the only way I could take that kind of risk is with him. I could not do it without him. But today I want you to be encouraged, and I want you to stay focused, invest your time and your efforts on what God is calling us to do. Happy Monday.